On June 22, 1941, the largest invasion force in history crossed into Soviet territory. 3 million soldiers, 3,400 tanks, yet the campaign would collapse within months in failure. This is the story of 5 fatal errors and how each one sealed Germany's defeat. Fatal mistake 1. Germany's planners built the entire campaign on a catastrophic false assumption. German commanders believed the Soviet state would collapse after one massive, overwhelming blow. They compared the Soviet Union to France, but the two nations were nothing alike. France fell in 6 weeks, but Russia covered 11 time zones and refused to break. German intelligence wildly underestimated Soviet manpower, listing only 200 divisions total. In reality, the Soviet Union could field over 5 million soldiers, with more mobilizing daily. 4 weeks in, German commanders realized they had severely misjudged everything about their enemy. Every assumption about Soviet weakness, every intelligence report, had been catastrophically wrong. Fatal mistake 2. The entire invasion lacked a single, clear, and decisive strategic objective. 3 separate army groups drove north, east, and south, each pulling resources in opposite directions. Army Group Center raced toward Moscow, but the High Command kept redirecting its armored strength. In August 1941, with Moscow within reach, the armored drive was abruptly halted and redirected south. The generals wanted Moscow, but the High Command ordered a massive pivot south toward Ukraine. The Kiev encirclement was a tactical triumph, yet it cost Germany 7 critical weeks of advance time. While Germany celebrated Kiev, Soviet forces near Moscow spent those weeks building new defensive lines. Every delay Germany chose in the summer gave the Soviets irreplaceable time to recover and rebuild. Fatal mistake 3. Germany's supply system was never designed for a campaign of this scale. The German army that invaded Russia still relied on 600,000 horses for its logistical transport. Only 1/3 of the Wehrmacht was fully motorized, leaving the rest dependent on animal power. Soviet rail tracks used a wider gauge than German railways, which paralyzed German supply trains. Supply trains could not advance until engineers converted miles of track, slowing everything behind. Panzer spearheads raced hundreds of miles ahead, but fuel and ammunition could not keep pace. In November 1941, entire panzer armies halted when supply trains simply stopped arriving at the front. Only 2 of the 18 daily supply trains authorized were actually reaching the forward units. Fatal mistake 4. Germany's planners completely failed to prepare for the Russian winter. The invasion was planned as a summer campaign only, with no winter clothing stockpiled for the troops. German commanders were ordered not to request winter gear, fearing it would signal a long campaign. When temperatures dropped to -40, German weapons jammed, engines froze, and men died. General Raus reported that 70% of German motorized vehicles broke down that first winter. Soviet soldiers, trained for Arctic warfare, fought with full winter equipment from the very start. Entire Siberian divisions, hardened by Arctic training, arrived to defend Moscow in December 1941. Those Siberian troops launched a devastating counterattack that pushed the Germans back from Moscow. Fatal mistake 5. Germany completely failed to foresee Soviet industrial and military resilience. German planners dismissed Soviet industry as primitive, yet the opposite was startlingly true. When Germany first met the T-34 tank in July 1941, their standard anti-tank weapons were useless. The T-34's sloped armor deflected almost every standard German anti-tank round fired at it. General Guderian saw the T-34 and immediately proposed copying its revolutionary sloped armor design. Soviet factories, relocated east of the Ural Mountains, were now beyond any possible German reach. These relocated factories would eventually outproduce Germany, churning out thousands of new tanks. Soviet production of the T-34 alone reached over 1,200 units per month by the end of 1942. Germany never built the industrial capacity to match Soviet output, making a long war unwinnable. Now let us examine how all 5 mistakes converged into a single, irreversible catastrophe near Moscow. Operation Typhoon launched in October 1941, tasked with the final capture of the Soviet capital. The Rasputitsa autumn mud season turned every road into a river of impassable, vehicle-swallowing sludge. With mud paralyzing supply columns, German forward units ran out of fuel and ammunition. German panzer divisions reached within 12 miles of Moscow, yet could advance no further. German soldiers could see the spires of Moscow through binoculars, yet lacked the fuel to move. On December 5, 1941, Soviet forces launched a massive counteroffensive that stunned the German command. Fresh Siberian troops poured into the attack, while frozen German soldiers scrambled to resist. German units, frozen and undersupplied, began retreating in disorder across the Moscow front. Over 700,000 German casualties had been suffered by December 1941, yet no victory was in sight. The 5 fatal mistakes had now compounded into a strategic disaster from which Germany never recovered. Let us now examine each mistake clearly, so their weight and consequence can be fully understood. Mistake 1 was ideological blindness. Germany saw the Soviet Union as racially and militarily inferior. This contempt led planners to dismiss Soviet strength and write wildly optimistic campaign timelines. Mistake 2 was strategic confusion. 3 objectives at once meant total commitment to none of them. The debate over Moscow versus Ukraine cost Germany the most critical weapon of all: irreplaceable time. Mistake 3 was logistical delusion, assuming blitzkrieg speed would outrun the need for supply. The Wehrmacht's horse-drawn transport and incompatible rail gauges doomed supply from the first week. Mistake 4 was meteorological arrogance, dismissing the Russian winter as a manageable inconvenience. No winter oil for engines, no antifreeze, no winter uniforms? The omissions were staggering in scale. Mistake 5 was industrial miscalculation. Germany's war economy could not outlast Soviet production. Germany produced roughly 3,200 tanks in all of 1941, while Soviet factories matched that in 3 months. Germany needed a short war above all, but every mistake it made guaranteed exactly the opposite outcome. The Eastern Front became exactly the prolonged war of attrition Germany had no capacity to win. Soviet losses were catastrophic, yet Stalin's state absorbed them and kept producing soldiers and machines. Germany's strategic position after December 1941 was irreversible. The war was now lost on the Eastern Front. The failure before Moscow ended Germany's chance for victory, while also opening the door to American entry. Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor brought America into the war, transforming the industrial balance entirely. Germany now faced a 3-front industrial war it could never win, sealed by Barbarossa's failure. What if Germany had avoided even one of these 5 fatal errors? Could the outcome have been different? Most historians agree. Even correcting one mistake might have altered the campaign's early trajectory. A direct drive on Moscow in August 1941 might have succeeded before winter arrived to save the city. Had winter clothing been stockpiled, German soldiers might have held their gains in the brutal cold. Had Germany built realistic supply lines, its panzer armies would not have starved before Moscow. But Germany made all 5 mistakes at once, and the compounded effect was decisive and complete. Barbarossa's failure condemned Germany to the exact war of attrition it had no chance of surviving. The battles of Stalingrad and Kursk would later confirm what Barbarossa had already decided. Operation Barbarossa stands as history's most consequential military failure, born of 5 fatal choices. 5 mistakes, 1 catastrophe. A lesson in the cost of arrogance written in the blood of millions.